Hello and welcome to Backstage at Bug, Firebug's podcast where we're speaking to less musicians and learning all about them. This is the penultimate episode of season 1, and today we are joined by Mouse Teeth, otherwise known as Nancy Dawkins, who is a Leicester-based musician, poet, writer, and is also my best friend. So this is a really lovely episode for me to do today. It was really great to hear from Nancy about her process, which actually kind of blew my mind because we'd never spoken about it before until now, and it is so different to so many people that I've spoken to who write music. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, obviously we have had some technical issues along the way, and every episode has been filmed differently, and this one is no exception because the video cut out right towards the end. We just do still have the audio, so we didn't lose too much, and it is only a few minutes at the end, but I apologise in advance for that. But yeah, I hope you really love this. Something that we conceptualised when we were putting together the idea for the podcast was that each artist would be eating food or drinking a themed drink in Firebug that is related to either a song or a lyric or their artist name, or something like that, which you may have noticed in some previous episodes has been easier to do than others. For example, the People Assembly came up with 100 puns for their name and songs, whereas Echolocation struggled to find anything in their extensive back catalogue at all related to food. So some have been easier than others, and some have been relatively tenuous connections. So this one is a really funny one, because with this one we convinced the kitchen to make some mouse-shaped waffles, which are not on the menu, obviously, but they're very cute, and that was fun. So you'll see some mouse-shaped waffles that are not available, but the normal waffles are, and they are very good. And Nancy is very insightful when speaking about her music. And also in the time since filming, I think there has been some changes in terms of her upcoming release. So keep in touch with her on social media to find out more about that. It's very exciting that she has this new material coming out soon. I hope you've been enjoying the season so far. I've had some really great conversations so far, and this one is also a fantastic one. Do check her out. She's always got some really cool live music and some live poetry performances coming up. So check out our social media for that too. I think this is a mouse delivery.
This is the mouse delivery.
Just a bit of a trial and error.
Oh wow. Oh my god.
Oh, this is so good.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Look at that.
That's gorgeous.
So we've had a delivery of ice cream, hot cinnamon waffles and ice cream in the shape of little mice. Well, for the camera, the mice teeth. Mouse's teeths. So you're a musician and a writer, and amongst other things. And I wanted to start talking about your early music and the journey that it's taken you to get from there to here, but in terms of sound. So I wanted to talk about how you first started making music around 2010, at the kind of peak of the indie golden age. And we were talking about influence,
And like folk indie as well.
big folk indie, and that was like in the charts. It wasn't even like a secondary thing. People like Laura Marling, Mumford and Sons,
Knowing the Whale.
Knowing the Well, all those bands that like played Summer Sunday, which you also played. Those kinds of like influences, which I feel like the more like folky people like Laura Marling, that influence is obvious. But then there's people that you mentioned like The Killers, Avril Lavigne, Shakira, the more pop influence.
I actually don't think those influences specifically were more on that indie side in that way. So I think relating to the like 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s indie thing, I actually learnt guitar initially by a combination of my dad having some chord books around and with tabs learning the entirety of the Kooks Inside In, Inside Out, Outside In, or whatever it was called. So I learned all of that record from tabs over a summer holiday, and then I moved on from that to learning how to play pretty much every Laura Marling song from Unless I Cannot Swim. Is that the first record? and that was how I learned to fingerpick, which then became like my signature style for when I was doing Nancy Dawkins stuff. So on that sort of the indie and indie folk thing, that was literally a direct, not necessarily influence, but like
a gateway
into music, and it was from that I started writing.
Yeah. Learning other people's songs. And,
Whereas I would say the Killers thing, which you found interesting, is a completely different tact. I find it really strange that the Killers is one of those bands that people love to hate. There's so much stuff that I love in, for example, the work of Mitski. That's a thread that's through a lot of musical theatre. I really love musical theatre, which you know and hate me for, mostly. I love big crescendos, big dramatic builds.
The theatrics of music.
I love a key change. I love unresolved chords that then resolve themselves. I love, all of that stuff. That big. I love big chorus vocals of choirs and things like that. The Killers do that really well in their second album, Sam's Town. I think that album is just a musical in my mind, and I feel similarly about that record that I do with Mitski's Be the Cowboy, in that it feels at times like a stage soundtrack, a stage show soundtrack, and
like
it has
something that doesn't exist.
And it has those big crescendos and dynamic changes, and it has those key changes and those like really kind of setting a scene. Theatrical, Mitski would call it cinematic, whereas I would call it more stage or whatever. I guess there's different nuances of it, but that's why I love the Killers. And that was one thing growing up that I would always listen to that album a lot and really love that dynamics in it. Avril Lavigne, I just think what girl our age wasn't influenced by her.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
The emotional vulnerability, I think, in a lot of her songs. I mean, her bigger ones, Skater Boy, Complicated and stuff, would be like emotional vulnerability. But if you listen to I'm With You or Nobody's Home, and that album, I mean, this is getting deep now, but her first album was released the same year that my mum died, which was a huge comfort for me. I used to sing. I mean, I felt like after that year, life kind of came into colour for me, which I know is a bit of irony, but music became a thing in my life, art became a thing in my life in a way that it probably was before, but I wasn't so conscious of it.
All of a sudden you had that like clicking
and it was, and I spent most of my time alone singing songs in my bedroom or painting, singing along to songs. And that Avril Lavigne record and that Shakira record, Laundry Service, were two albums that were a big part of that. But honestly, I just think that it's for Avril Lavigne, huge emotional vulnerability through lyricism, and the fact that someone so young was feeling so much and able to vocalize it in a way that made it like viscerally experienceable. And Shakira's a huge one. I always talk about Shakira as a huge influence as much. She's an incredible songwriter and composer. She writes all of her songs in both English and Spanish, both rhyming in both. She's an incredible storyteller. I think that's one thing I really took, especially in my earlier days, like kind of extended metaphors drawn out to create like a scene of a story. So you think in Laundry Service, there's Underneath Your Clothes is probably one of the famous ones that like has that sort of storytelling in it. It's like, you're a song written by the hands of God, don't get me wrong. Like, it's like vulnerable and it's simple, but it's like really lyrical and quite poetic. And I just think that album, if you've been in relationships, especially if you've been in relationships with shit men, it's like amazing. I mean, the fact that I was 8 years old singing I'd rather eat my soup with a fork or drive a cab in New York because to talk to you is harder work. And what's the point of wasting all my words? It's just the same or even worse than reading poems to a horse.
8-year-old you being...
It was actually worryingly pathetic for a lot of my life. But I think she's an incredible songwriter, and I still find her influential now to listen to that album.
There's been a lot of conversations recently about critical around pop music and the people who make it. And I think it's a nuanced conversation because I think we are in like a world time where we're critical of people's actions and the way that they engage with money and spending and everything, and with the fact that industry, lots of stuff about like industry plants, that kind of thing. What do you feel about like the conversation around something that's genuine. Does it matter that it's genuine? Does it have to be genuine? Especially when it comes to pop music versus not pop music.
I think no one really knows what they mean by genuine when they're saying it. I think the whole conversation about industry plants is mostly being had by people who don't understand what record labels are. I mean, that's a really obvious statement that's been said multiple times. A lot of it is only directed to women. And so it's like, it's an industry plant, like they paid someone to like do this. Like, have you ever heard of a manager? Have you ever heard of a record label? Like, that's kind of how it works.
All of a sudden somebody's there and then they're not
they're
there
being
and then
told
they
what to do. Like, that's because it's their job.
Yes.
So I feel like a lot of it's just bollocks.
So I mean,
when it comes to pop, I don't really know if I have an opinion or a particularly formed one. I think that it really depends on the integrity of the person themselves. When it comes to being genuine, I don't really know what that means or what people want that to mean. And I think it's probably different in every circumstance.
Do you think as well it's part of the trap of that women aren't allowed to be women have to be autobiographical in their writing, and therefore we only care about things that are written by women who are saying
100%
the truth?
But I think that's true of not just women but all kind of marginalised people. And I understand it. I think the world so wants, and usually people who are on our side really, so want someone to be a voice for us. Like, oh my god, it's someone like me who has a voice. I want them to speak directly of their own experience. But then you get trapped into that, and you aren't allowed to be anything else. And you're not allowed to be silly and funny and fictional and all of that stuff. So I understand where it comes from, but I do think a lot of that, like it was when Beyonce released, I think, Lemonade probably, which is a brilliant album, and people were like debating what was real and what wasn't, and like, you know, whether, and I even saw it when after, I mean this is a bit different because he's not marginalised, but after Bo Burnham released Inside, people saying like, it's not his real life. It's like, not only is that a music record, it's also comedy.
It's on multiple levels. It doesn't need to be real.
And I think people, but again, that's also hugely related to social media, in that we're so used to seeing what we believe to be direct peeks into people's lives, that we have been conditioned to assume that everything we see of anyone is true of their life.
It's the truth,
which obviously isn't true for art.
No.
I mean, it's not true for many things, but especially art.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your relationship like with social media in terms of writing and performance, I suppose?
My relationship with social media is chaotic, to say the least. You know what, I actually love social media. I'm one of the few who would probably say I enjoy it. I enjoy the performance of it. I enjoy that I can play with what's real and what's not. And it actually really does influence my writing. I've written a lot recently, especially poems, not so much music. My poems tend to come from a more cerebral place, and therefore concepts like my relationship with social media are more likely to come through, whereas in my songs I'm more likely to be like, my heart's broken, I'm sad today.
I guess social media is one of those things though that if you're not talking about it directly, that it doesn't mean it's not still the influence is not still there.
But I don't think I necessarily talk about it. I mean, I do a bit talk about it directly in my poems, but it's more the idea of like wanting to be perceived. That comes through a lot.
Sorry.
It's nice to break it up with just some shock moments.
Sort of a jump scare. Yes.
So I have I think one of the last poems I finished properly was This Is My Season of Abstraction, which is completely about the distance between self and being perceived, which a lot of that involves social media. I have a line, I'm going to get my own line wrong, but I'm going to try and paraphrase it, which is, I will post online, wish to disappear, long for a spotlight, always delete posts online ad infinitum, which is about that like desire to be seen and perceived, and then wanting to hide, and also I feel like with me, there's an element of hiding in plain sight. Like the more that I put out of myself, the more I'm actually conserving or curating. I enjoy that. There was a time at which I found social media incredibly toxic. I don't find that anymore. I enjoy it. Not even doom scrolling anymore, because I've managed to get rid of that. Like fun scrolling on TikTok is something that I struggle with, but I have ADHD, so like that's just life.
It's gonna happen.
But when it comes to kind of like Instagram presence and like my presence online, I find it interesting and I find it fun. I wish I could do TikTok more. I find video format very difficult because I'm an Instagram gal. It's just that generation. And I've always been more of a still image person
rather than thinking in videos.
I find it difficult to edit and stuff because it's not as like intuitive, I guess. But yeah, I enjoy social media, and it doesn't. But it's less that social media impacts my writing. It's that the concept of identity and perception and how I'm being perceived is something that I already consider a lot on a daily basis. And my relationship with Instagram specifically and social media in general is influenced by that. But I also think that I'm on a ramble now. I'm neurodivergent, as I recently got diagnosed with, and that's a really common thing with women specifically women and non-men who have neurodivergence. Is that right? Anyway, the feeling a distance between who you believe yourself to be and who you think people perceive you as. And that distance of, I think I'm a really great person, but I spend a lot of my life thinking everyone hates me. How can that be true? There's a gap between who I believe I am and how I'm seen. And social media is like a really cool and interesting, and I guess to some people dangerous way of playing with that space.
Have you managed to permeate the waffle?
I have, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Success.
I've had some waffle.
These are in the menu, not the mouse version, the regular version, unfortunately.
I think they should make the mouse version.
You know what, maybe. I feel like if we suggest this, the kitchen may kill us. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the songwriting process, because when we had our conversation before this...
What process?
Your answer blew my entire mind when I found out one thing. So I wanted to talk about, and it's a conversation we've had a lot, about how when you're an artist or a maker or doing any kind of, I think, creative process, or at least this is our experience, the making isn't necessarily when you are sitting down and doing it, it's all the time around it. It's the silent moments where
what
you're
silent moments?
When you're not pressing sound into you from every possible source of entertainment. Anyway, so yeah, it's the moments where in between where the ideas come, and it's like the thinking about it, and it's all this stuff. And I interviewed Echolocation, and they said something interesting too. And obviously they're a band who get together and jam. That's their way of writing. And they all said,
I makes me want to die.
Yeah, I feel that. But they said that the way they write songs is in between the moments of other songs happening. It's like when they're meant to be sitting down and working out a set list. It's in between those moments that in the kind of there's an energy of things happening. So I wanted to ask you, what is your process for a song happening from very beginning to very end?
Specifically a song?
Yeah.
Okay. There are multiple answers to this question. A typical song, like the way that I've written probably most of them in my life.
Yeah.
Since I started playing guitar, because I used to write songs in my head when I was a kid and I'd just sing them. But most of the songs that I've written as a musician playing guitar, I will pick up a guitar, either because I've gone, I want to pick up a guitar, mostly because I've gone, I need to rehearse for a gig, and then I'll start playing a chord or something, and I'll be like, that's nice, and then I'll do another one, and then I'll come up with like a really simple, I was going to say riff, but I feel like that's probably giving myself too much credit, little chord progression. Or whatever, which will become the verse. It's interesting actually, I saw a TikTok the other day. I think it was John Mayer, who's not someone that I know of or like, but it just came up on, like, because I songwriting stuff and singer things come up on my thing sometimes. I think it was him. I don't really know what he looks like.
I think you sent me this.
Yeah. And he said it's about Ouija boarding it, which I love because I'm trying to make a pedal board out of a Ouija board at the moment, so I'm into that. But just like the idea of like you just go with it, like you just play something and then you just play the next thing that comes to your mind and then you just sing until it's a song. That's pretty much what I do, and I'd never seen anyone else do that before. I wish it wasn't him, but it was interesting because I'd never seen anyone put it that way, and I'd never seen anyone else do it that way.
Like automatic writing.
It just happens, yeah. So I had to pick up a guitar. Mostly it's in open D because that's easy, and I go, yeah, here's a chord, yeah, and then I go, oh, there's another one, and that's nice. And then I have like maybe 2 or 3, maximum 4 chords, and that'll be the verse, and then I'll write the first line, and then I'll write a line that rhymes with it, and that'll be the second line. And then I'll sing those 2 lines over and over until the third line happens. And then I'll sing those 3 lines until the 4th line happens. And then I'll sing those 4 lines until the 5th line happens. And then I'll have a verse.
And this is where we get into the fascinating territory. You don't write your lyrics down.
I don't write lyrics down.
You just have them in your brain. Because I asked before this, so I said, would you mind sending me some of your lyrics and we can like write them down? And you were like, well, I'll have to transcribe them because they're only in my brain. And that was flummoxed. But I guess now you're saying that you repeat things, so you have the first line, then the second line, and that, again, it's almost like that memory game of like
almost.
I went to the shop and I bought this and this, you know, the one, and like
I also just think
it really wedges its way in.
Lyrics do just stick in my brain.
Yeah,
I can. You could play me a song that I used to know the whole lyrics of when I was 8 years old that I haven't heard since then. Play it now, I'd probably know most of the words, if not all of them. My memory in general is actually probably quite good. I generally have quite a good memory. I don't have a good memory for quotes. Like, I'm very good at paraphrasing them. I'm very good at retaining meaning, not so much direct words, but when it comes to lyrics, I can retain
word for word.
Word for word.
I suppose that's necessary for structuring.
But it just always happened. Always. And as I said, as a kid, I used to write songs just by singing them out loud. And then it would stick in my brain, you know, to the melody. It's like words and the melody kind of come together.
Yeah, so it's like the music, the melody and the words are completely entwined.
Yeah, they're not like pull awayable.
So it's like if you write a song to those 3 guitar chords, can you never separate the melody and the because you sat down and thought, actually no, I'm going to change those chords. Would it be really difficult for you then to write something
and I very
different?
rarely do that, and it's why I don't really edit songs either, and I find it really difficult if there's a bit in a song. I mean, I find this difficult in life in general, but specifically in songwriting it is harder, I think. If I go, that line's a bit weak, tough, it's part of the song now, like it wouldn't be the song without it. There are a few
because
times.
It's like it then leads with the line after, so they're kind of,
it's logically connected in my mind. So I find it very difficult to change things, and it's very, very rare that I maintain. If I scrap a song, which to be honest doesn't happen very often, if I scrap a song, I don't tend to retain the lyrics from it because it hasn't worked the melody or whatever. Kind of have to scrap the whole thing. Sometimes things do come through and it's not quite as black and white as that, but generally that's the way, because the melody kind of I think because I write to the chord progression, the words have already been dictated by the song anyway. It changes sometimes I have used things I've written down or reused lines from poems in songs. I am then more likely to forget them when that happens, interestingly. And I sometimes can find it quite difficult to fit them into melodies. I don't understand how people can write. I mean, I know that this is how you write. I don't know how someone can write a whole song written lyrically and then put it to a melody.
Music,
It wouldn't fit to a melody if I did that. I wouldn't be able to retrofit it that way. It just wouldn't feel right, and I think it would take me longer and I'd struggle with it.
How fascinating the way different people, I mean, it's so crazy to me. It's so like the exact opposite. I mean, even us two, between us, we've got 2 exact opposite ways of writing, but then you compare it to the entire world and everyone's just truly found their own
Apart from fucking John Mayer, apparently.
I was just saying, like,
Yeah, John Mayer and you completely like this. So let's talk about live gigs and playing live, which is something that you've been doing a lot more in the past year, I guess, year and 2 years, after not playing for a while as well. I think it'd be interesting to talk about the actual, like, the experience of playing to a crowd and the feeling that has, and I think especially when you are a solo artist, I think it's a really different relationship with crowds than it is if you're in a band.
I do kind of go into a sort of, I've been told that I'm very intense on stage, I've been told that I'm scary on stage. I think it depends on the day. Some days I say more and some days I say less, but I like that because I don't think there are that many times in my life when I do that.
Right, yeah. It's like a very unique experience to
that
being on stage,
thing,
not even like the whole of being on stage. It's like the moments where you're singing, or the moments. Do you consider, like,
I sometimes switch it off in between songs?
In between, exactly. Yeah.
I'm still playing. When I used to do the Nancy Dawkins stuff, that was like incredibly harrowing. It's probably more depressing than the stuff I write now. Probably because I was sadder than I am now. Definitely because I was sadder than I am now. The in between, I would kind of purposefully be, like, I'm funny and I'm a teenager, because I think there was as well that whole thing of, like, I was a kid and I didn't want people to think I was just this, like, messed up, like, troubled child. I wanted to be seen as personable and someone you could interact with. So I would very purposefully kind of, like, jump from this, like, super intense kind of miserable performance mode into, like, the kind of pulling jokes in between. Whereas now I'm older, and the sound is the way that it is, I'm trying out a bit less, actually talking less on stage, sometimes not talking at all on stage, letting the sound speak for itself and making it uncomfortable, like kind of almost purposely making it uncomfortable for an audience.
Do you think that's happened since you've been performing spoken word poetry? Because that for me feels like a real characteristic of that kind of performance.
I think it's also being electric, and because I use the kind of ambient sounds that I use with my pedals, there's a lot more space that can be filled by that doesn't, so I don't need to fill it with
So for people
words.
who haven't seen you play, what is that pedal?
It's a
situation?
reverb pedal, and it's like a shimmer reverb, so it's kind of like celestial.
So it's a kind of like an ambient hum almost.
Yeah, it's like an ambient
build
hum that's a bit spacey, that I sometimes also distort as well.
Yeah.
And I kind of build on itself.
Yeah, so it's almost like a soundscape and create a mood and
and I'm trying to play more. Sometimes I don't feel quite brave enough to leave the space, and sometimes I do. I played a really, really gorgeous gig in Sheffield at this venue called Sydney and Matilda. For Flair magazine, and that was the best gig I've ever played, and I didn't say anything the whole time on stage, and I think that room really lent itself to that because it's a basement room, so like the reverb really just fully envelops the whole room and comes back to you, so the space was already filled and I didn't feel like I needed to fill it with anything else, and I think that was probably the show that I consider to be my best because of that. What
elements for you stand out as being a really great show? What is it that has to come together?
When the sound's good.
Yeah.
A responsive audience. I got a bit of a reputation for being, I think I got a bit of a reputation for being a bitch on stage because people kept acting up in shows. So when that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I guess responsive and also respectful.
Responsive and respectful.
Yeah.
When people want to be there,
Yeah.
like that was the thing about that show, is that like I just recently played a string of shows in Sheffield, kind of in the same sort of scene, and it built like a following of people who I think were quite excited to see me. So they were there to see me, and so they were really like invested in it.
So they weren't necessarily. It wasn't all new people who never.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes
kind of
you have a new
engaged in it
sometimes you have a new show and it's great.
Yeah.
And there have been some shows where I've known barely anyone there, and most people have been new to me, and it's been like they've really been caught by it, and I love when that happens. So it's not necessarily always the case, but I think it does help with the respectful thing and responsive thing. I think sound just really, really is important. Like if you've got bad sound, you just feel so off your game, and it feels like it's you, even though mostly it's not. It's usually
like the
sound
on-stage
techs or
sound.
yeah. It's usually sound tech's problem or venue problem or just acoustics of the room or whatever, or no one's fault, you know.
Just happens that
just
sometimes
happens,
it's off.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're solo, there's kind of nothing to hide behind. So when you feel like it's off, it's just so off-putting.
Yeah. There's not many things you can focus on when you're actually playing. The only, I mean, it feels quite meditative to play. I think, and you're in that like pure focus mode. That if something's wrong and that sound isn't right, then that's kind of the only thing in your brain is like, what am I hearing right now? A lot of the time, so that makes sense. So that's what makes a good gig.
Yeah, good sound mostly.
Yeah, sound based. Interesting. Yeah.
Like, the comment I get most after gigs is like, your vulnerability is incredible. Like I don't know how you can get on stage and be so vulnerable. My answer has always been I've always been far more vulnerable on stage than I have been off it, and actually I'm not sure if half the time it is real vulnerability. And I've hidden a lot behind extreme vulnerability in my life. Here's all the stuff, here it is, take it, I'm safe here. Yeah.
Let's talk about what you're doing at the minute, and what you're working on currently.
I'm making a record, slowly but surely. Don't ask me when, don't ask me how. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying. I'm recording it with John Helps, Leicester legend. Gotta love him. Yeah, so I'm recording an album with John Helps. I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying it. I don't think it's secret. He's obviously super busy because he's on tour a lot, so it's kind of happening when it is. But I want it to be. I'd rather it be slow and certain than rushed. And
you're not doing it in the way where you book a studio for a week, you smash an album out, you leave.
No,
you're doing it
it's quite collaborative, I guess. Although he'd argue that it's not, and that I do all the work, which is why I love him. Because I'm definitely not John, and you know it. Yeah, so it's hopefully next year sometime that will happen. I feel like it's going to maybe have progressed from something that it was to maybe something new. I feel like it's shifted a little in my mind as to what shape it's going to take.
And it's going to include songs and poetry, as it stands.
As it stands, that's what we kind of... It originally was only going to be music, and then I kept getting so many comments of people saying, like, what really sets you apart when you see you live is this, and, you know, your songs are great, but what you remember afterwards, or if you were talking to someone afterwards and be like, oh, I saw Mouse Teeth and she was really great. Which one was Mouse Teeth? Oh, the one who does poems. It's the thing that sets you apart. I also think it's kind of become less abnormal for that at the moment. There's, you know, that whole kind of like post-punk revival thing of people talking over music,
being the fall.
Yeah, being the fall.
Your least favourite kind of genre.
That's not my least favourite kind
of
genre.
Not?
It's just my most... It wouldn't be my least favourite kind of genre if it wasn't the most used genre.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
It's like, we can't all be the fall. And we shouldn't want to be. I feel like kind of spoken word stuff is becoming more like in the music world, I guess. I mean, even Florence and the Machine had some although like, I probably shouldn't admit this, I do skip the spoken words bits at the beginning because her voice is just so posh. And I mean, I probably have a posh voice, and there's probably people listening to this who'd be like, you have a posh voice, what are you talking about? I'm from Leicester though, so it's different.
Where is she from?
London, I assume, somewhere southern.
Somewhere posh.
Just the beginning of, is it choreo, and it's like, there's just this little spoken word bit and it, maybe cut that out.
What is she going to hear? Don't send this
stop me ever getting the chance of supporting Florence and the Machine. I love her and I love that song so much, but sometimes I do feel like, and the thing is that I admit I get a lot of people saying like spoken word is really cringe and I don't enjoy it. Yeah, same. I hate so much poetry. Like, I really shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna, and I do frequently, so it's not new. Like, I hate most poetry. I genuinely dislike most poetry, but I've said this before about art.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like most art.
You don't like going to gigs?
I don't like going to gigs. I don't really like live music. Like, but what I do, I love.
Yeah.
And I think it's better to be discerning, I guess, in that way. And I hope that the poetry that I write and perform, people like. And I have had people saying like, oh, I don't usually really get spoken word, but like, that was good. And I think the way that it works around the music helps that. And I'm trying to not use the same kind of vocal inflections that we've sort of carried over from this very American style of slam poetry that I find sort of like overly earnest and really annoying. Don't stop your sentences halfway through the sentence. There's no need for it. Let the sentence finish. And kind of like speak how you talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is going to be poetry on the record. How much I haven't decided yet, which I haven't decided yet. I'm trying, it's hard to thematically link the music to the poetry when so much of it feels like so different worlds, but also so overlaps. Sometimes it's like too much of an overlap, because I steal lines from songs and poems and vice versa, and I don't know whether that's a cool thread through or if it's like too much repetition. But we'll see, and we'll figure that out, and I really trust John to just be good and nice, and the experience of recording has been really casual and really nice and exactly what I needed, because I am terrified generally of recording. It's been a really big hurdle for me. I can perform live.
What is it about recording that you find difficult specifically?
For a long time, I was super young when I started this. I was so young. For a long time, I didn't think that I knew enough about music.
The process of...
Yeah, to make my own decisions. But I didn't trust anyone else to make decisions for me. And I wanted to be able to make my own decisions. What really helped actually was my friend Leia, who we'd just sit and listen to music, and she'd be like, what in this track do you like? And I'd be like, oh, I like the big, mostly it's like, I like the big bassy distortion on that bass, because I love like low end. John always mocks me for it. And so back realising, oh no, actually I do have an ear for music, and I do know what I'm talking about, and I do know what I like. Oh, I love the crescendo on that, and I really enjoy that key change, and I love the way that the vocals speed up, or like I love the fact that they've like packed loads of lyrics into that bit. And so I being able to discern what I actually do know about music, because I listen to music every day. Most points of the day I'm listening to music. Obviously I know what I like. I do think there's probably an element as well of like internalized misogyny in that, in that like a lot of what I was listening to was like the same 5 musicians, all of which were like women. So part of me would be like, oh, I don't really know that much about music as a whole because I just listen to these same women. But then it's like, okay, what in those do you like? There's clearly the reason why you listen to them all the time.
And not having the like technical jargon to explain stuff, which exactly. is, I think, sometimes expected to kind of give you to be respected,
especially in a studio setting. You know, I like, this is why I like working how I am now. You know, I can be like, I like that sound of that bass, or I like the sound that synth's made, and there's someone else to go, okay, well that's what that is, and that's how you make the sound, and now I know that's what that is and how you make the sound. And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know how you make that sound, let's play around, because let's be honest, most people don't actually know that much, because music is so shifting and so specific,
and there's so many ways to get to one
exactly
result.
But I just felt for a long time that I didn't know what I was talking about, didn't know what I liked enough, didn't know what I wanted enough, and mostly like just didn't have faith in my ability to voice what I wanted, and also just like, I mean, again, looking back now, post kind of like neurodivergent diagnoses, I can see the way that I experienced so much of my music career, how it was impacted with that, because there's this whole thing of like feeling like you need instruction for things, and I felt so much like I just want someone to tell me how to do it, and the whole overwhelming thing about music was like, okay, so you have to record, okay, well how do I do that? And you know, I'd ask people, like, well, some people just go and do a single, some people go in and do, and you know, you can go to someone who just like records it, or you can go to like a producer who does it with you, and I'm like, I need you to tell me which one is the right one. I don't know how I'm supposed to know which is the right way. And then once it's done, like, how do you release it? Like, should I look for a manager? Should I look for a manager first? Should I look for like a booking agent who does, like, should I tour? Like, what? And like, I want the step-by-step instructions, and I felt so overwhelmed by it as a child. Yeah. And that I was just like, I can't, and I still feel overwhelming now. If I think about it, I'll never get it done. So I'm just doing the record. We're doing it how we're doing it. And you know, I just need to have faith that that's right for me. But yeah, I just felt so held back of like, and because I didn't have the instructions, I never felt like was never sure whether what I was saying would be correct, and I was so worried about being wrong. It didn't help that I was mostly in rooms full of old men making decisions and saying things, and so I was like, well, I don't know anything, and I don't know what's right, and no one's told me. And also
probably some like outdated ideas and ways of doing things on top of all the other layers of stuff.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I was super lucky as a kid that I had people who picked up on me and gave me opportunities and helped me record and funded that and gave me ideas and stuff, but also, you know, I never really felt like I understood what was going on, and like I was kind of asked what I wanted, but in a way that didn't help give me the language or the support in order to actually figure out what I wanted. You know, no one said, what records do you like? Yeah. How do we replicate them?
Yeah. It's all well and good asking, but I think you have to ask in a way that's productive, because you can't assume everybody knows, and I think that feels purposeful to me.
Oh yeah, I think sometimes it maybe is. I think sometimes it's also just like men not realising that someone wouldn't just be able to say what they think, which obviously when you're in a room with a teenage girl isn't the case. And you know, not necessarily through any fault of their own, and carelessness. But yeah, so I've managed to kind of get over that by working with someone who I like, who I trust, who doesn't pretend that they know everything, but who actually is a lot more knowledgeable than he lets on, and who genuinely actually makes me feel like I'm good at it. Because, you know, I'll go, well, we need to do this drum part, and he's like, I can't do this, and then I'll do it, and he'll like, well, you can do it. Why are you doing it? Or like, oh, I can't, you know, we'll play this synth part, okay, you play it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I can actually do this, because I can play most instruments if I try. I mean, when I say most, like, give you a trumpet, it's not going to happen, but you know.
You've dabbled with quite a few.
I've dabbled with most of them, and I'm generally like, I can figure them out if you give me enough time and enough space and little pressure.
Bit of a deadline.
So yeah, it's nice to feel like I have faith in my abilities to do it whenever it does happen.
When it comes to making, I mean, we kind of have already discussed this, but not in a specific way. So when I was speaking to Echolocation, we were talking about rehearsal spaces and about recording spaces, and generally just like the physical spaces that you create in, and about what they mean to you. Because I think some people have quite a important connection to where they are, whether that's in like a I'm sat in a room, I have all my things around me, or I'm sat in a room and I have my notebook, or or I have sat in a room and I have absolutely nothing in there, and that's really important. Or even like you've lived in multiple cities and played in multiple cities, and what's your relationship to physical space and your creative process?
It's interesting because I feel like I have an incredibly strong relationship with physical space. I'm a Taurus. That's what we do.
You're a nester.
Oh, we're nesters. And I definitely am a nester, and I'm very fond of my kind of physical and material rituals of life. I really struggle when they're dampened, which has been the case since I've been living at home recently. Really looking forward to moving out and having the space to the literal space to do that again. I like my surroundings to be mine and to feel like mine, and that doesn't necessarily mean not shared. It means something about the quality of it. When it comes to my creativity, that's not so much the case. It's like the space stuff happens in the background of my whole life. I require certain space to exist in order to flourish as a person, and creativity is sort of on top of that. Obviously it's a foundation for it rather than intertwined with it. I don't sit down at a desk and write. It's probably death for me. Poems just come to me anyway. I wish they'd stop. Or lines do, which is even more frustrating. I like it when a whole poem comes to me in one, because that's easy work. But when the line comes, then I go, okay, well now I'm going to have to figure out a time and a place to actually make this into a poem, and that's annoying. And most of the time I don't. There's no correlation really between space and creativity in that way. It things like that come when they will. Yeah. Mostly in bed or in conversation. Or just when I stop and go, I might come up with a line now, and then it's there already. It's almost like it's waiting for me to just go, there you are. Open the door. Yeah. There aren't many times when I can stop and think I'm going to write something and there's not something there. Yeah. And when I say write, I mean it's here. Yeah. I'm not actually doing anything. The mind palace. It's happening here. Pretend writing. Yeah. It's so wild to me. I still can't get over it. the mental writing. This is why I loved 3,000 Days of 3,000 Years of Longing. The scene where Zafir, I want to say her name Zafir. I don't remember any character names. Not one. Well, like the third girlfriend, basically. Yeah, the really clever one. She asks for the day sleeping of the jinn so that she can find the answer to her mathematical equation, and it's externalized everything in her head so she can come to the end point. When I tell you, I fucking sobbed. I don't know if I'm supposed to be swearing in this. You can swear, so yeah, it's fine, don't worry. I think it's okay. I sobbed because I was like, yes, that is what I want. It's because it's here. It's all here. And the reason I don't write it down is because as soon as you write it down, it's like stopped it. Yeah. It's like stopped the flowing of it. But I wish that it could just automatically be out so that I could have it there and it be done and externalized, like tangible. Tangible. But in terms of space, it's anywhere. Music, again, like writing music is just wherever there's a guitar. That's usually been my bedroom, but it can also be like my living room if that's where it is. It can, whatever. It doesn't need to be tidy. It doesn't need to be messy. It doesn't need to be any of that. It will come when it does, and that is wherever I am when I do it. Thank you for coming in. I hope you enjoyed your mouse things. Would you review them for the listeners, please? Really good waffles. I don't know why I'm now looking in the camera. Like I would rate them. I'm gonna say 5 out of 5. Mostly for the shape. Love the jelly bean addition. Waffle was tender. Great ice cream. Good ice cream. I really like the ice cream, actually. That's my favourite bit. Yeah. Sauce was great. Probably will eat some more of the sauce. That's a success, I think. Thank you. Nice. Alright, done. That was a good day. Oh shit. Why has this gone off? Oh my god, I swear to god, if that wasn't filming, I'm gonna cry.